Please give a warm welcome to Dinesh D'Souza.
Thank you very much. Wow, this is fantastic. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm always honored to speak for Young America's Foundation. I've been doing this now since the early 90s. I think I was once told that I've spoken more for Young America's Foundation than any other speaker. But this is a group that is really penetrating the campus, providing a vitally needed alternative. And so I'm thrilled to see all of you here this afternoon. I'd like to recognize my wife, Debbie, who's here somewhere. Where are you? Say hi. If you saw the movie Hillary's America, Debbie actually sings God Bless America in the movie. Actually, when I asked her to do that, she's like, well, honey, I don't think I should sing in the movie. Everyone's going to say that you only chose me to sing because I'm your wife. And I said, no, honey, I'm actually choosing you to sing because you're free. So, but if you've seen the movie, you know that she can sing. Now, I want to talk today about the Trump phenomenon, and I also want to talk about the campus phenomenon. And the two are actually connected. For starters, you know, even though it's now been, 3 months since the election, for me, the shock and the elation and the relief of that election has not really subsided, because the significance of that election, I think, is difficult even now for us to grasp. Let me put it in a little bit of context. If we step back historically, American politics is typically a one-party system. And what I mean by that is that typically American politics is dominated for an extended period of time by one team. And there's another team, another party, but it tends to be the echo. It's the also ran. Now, look at American history. In the beginning, of course, the Federalists were the dominant, in fact, pretty much the only party. But ever since the party system developed with Andrew Jackson in the 1820s, from the 1820s until the Civil War, the Democratic Party was the majority party. It controlled the presidency, it controlled the Congress, and it controlled the court. From 1865, when the Civil War ended, until 1932, the Republican Party was the dominant party nationwide. This is not to say the Democrats couldn't win, but even if they won, they would be carried by the Republican tide. It was a Republican era. And then from 1932 until 1980, the Democratic Party once again became the majority party, controlling all three branches of government for the bulk of that time. Again, there were Republican interludes. You might have Eisenhower in there, but Eisenhower essentially behaved like a moderate Democrat. He was carried by the Democratic tide. He did not have the power to reverse any of the major initiatives of the New Deal. And then from 1980 to now, American politics has anomalously been divided. American politics has been a kind of a tie, unusual in American history, in which neither side has controlled everything. For 8 years under Reagan, we had the presidency, but they had the Congress. And then they had the presidency, and we got the Congress. And under Obama, the same thing. Obama had a brief interlude where he had the Congress as well. That's when Obamacare got through. But for the most part, it's been a Republican Congress. We've been blocking him. So American politics has had this precarious, and the Supreme Court evenly divided. But now with Trump, we have a new possibility, almost a possibility unenvisioned by our side, unenvisioned certainly by many Republicans. Because this Trump victory, I think we have to candidly admit, is not entirely our victory. Many of us, some of us, opposed him. Others were indifferent to him. So his victory is not because of us, but some conservatives and Republicans would have to admit, despite us. He did it without us. And, truth be told, he doesn't really need us. Not entirely. So our peculiar moment is that at the very time when Republicans and conservatives have the prospect of controlling all three branches of government, we have the presidency, we have both houses of Congress, we might very well over the next 4 years get the court. We have a candidate who somehow doesn't seem to fit the conservative pattern. If you looked at all the candidates, all the Republicans on the stage, Trump kind of stood out and provoked a certain kind of unease, if not hostility, in all the others, that they didn't show toward each other, but only toward him. So what is it about Trump that's going on here? And if you can see the left, they are out of control. And some of what you're seeing on the campus is a reverberation of that. Because in some ways the left has always hated Republicans and they've always hated conservatives, but Trump inspires hatred and derision in a category of his own. And part of what we have to think about is what is Trump really doing, and what is it that he represents? Is he trying to remake conservatism? I don't think so. He is trying to remake the Republican Party. But the Republican Party badly needs to be remade. This is one of the sleepiest, most inert, most ineffective, incompetent, and useless parties in the history of American politics. Trump did not win because of the Republican Party. They almost stopped him from winning. So the Republican Party needs renovation from the ground up, What is American conservatism? A good question to ask, because when you're on campus, and I think we're living in a time very different from when I was a student. When I was a student, there were young people who were resistant to conservatism. They disagreed with it. They didn't share its values. But to me, today on the campus, I find that most young people, it's not that they reject conservatism. They don't know what it is. And they don't know what it is because we don't say what it is. And our political leaders don't say what it is. You could have followed this whole election debate and have no idea of what it is that conservatives are trying to conserve. Traditionally, conservatives conserve stuff. Now, according to the left, what we're trying to conserve is things like bigotry, insensitivity, privilege, hierarchy. But if those things are wrong, what is it that we stand for? What are we conserving? Well, I would argue that what we're conserving is the principles of the American Revolution. And so, ironically, American conservatism is protecting and conserving a revolutionary idea. The American Revolution was a liberal revolution. By liberal, I mean classically liberal. It stood for three types of liberty: economic liberty or economic freedom, political freedom, and freedom of thought and religion. Those are the three, that's the tripod of freedoms, if you will, on which the American Revolution was fought. And those are the three types of liberty that we today are trying to protect. Now, the attack on Trump, quite simply, is that he is a fascist. He's a fascist. And that may sound like a familiar term because, as you know, even on the campuses, we have these sort of anti-fascist coalitions that are mobilizing. Now, we're a long way from the fascism of the 1920s and 30s. and all of you are born long after it, and all we have is vague understandings and pictures of what that represented. If you look at old footage of the Nazis on the streets in the 20s and 30s, they wear masks, they wear costumes, that you find them threatening and bullying people on the street. It was quite common, for example, for them to encounter Jews and cut off half their beard, mock them, make fun of them. Then you had the Nuremberg laws, which were discriminatory. The point I want to make is if you look at the mood of the 1930s, which was intimidating, bullying, bordering on terrorist. This was, by the way, a long time before the Holocaust. People didn't know about the Holocaust. The Holocaust hadn't occurred, so they didn't have the hindsight of history. We're talking about a movement in its early stages. If you just watch it, you notice that it resembles scenes that we see in America today. But those scenes in America today are not coming from the right, they're coming from the left. I just remember looking at pictures of the Berkeley protest of some few weeks ago now, with all these masked, terroristic rebels, disruptors, if you will, and they look almost exactly like Nazi stormtroopers. And they behave like them. Remember, this is a time, as I say, when Nazism didn't have gas chambers, when Nazism actually was able to come to power through a quasi-legal democratic process in which Nazism had the affirmation of the political system, and in which Nazism actually was seen as fighting against something that was also bad that preceded it. Now, this brings me to a kind of a paradox that I want to discuss, which is this. How is it that the anti-fascists in America today and on the campus look and sound and behave like the early fascists? How is it possible to conduct anti-fascism in a fascist way? What licenses this display of unbelievable intimidation, intolerance, and fear in the name of fighting it? This seems, on the face of it, paradoxical. But it's not just an intellectual paradox, because it's the reality with which you live. Now, Trump lives with it too, but Trump has formidable weapons at his disposal, notably his Twitter. Trump can fire back, and he does fire back. And one of the things I love about Trump is the fact that he's fighting not just a political war, but a culture war. He doesn't hesitate to go after Rosie O'Donnell and Meryl Streep. He doesn't hesitate to go after Saturday Night Live. He recognizes that this isn't just a political fight. Part of the problem for conservatives is that for 30 years, we take the whole field of the battle, we pick the tiny corner of it called elections, and we fight there. The left, meanwhile, does the long march through academia and elementary and secondary schools, through Broadway and Hollywood, through the media and the culture more generally. And a lot of the political issues that we lose have been fought already and won in the cultural sphere where we are not even fighting. Some people say, well, how did we get gay marriage overnight? Well, we didn't get gay marriage overnight. The gay marriage debate began when Ellen came out of the closet, and Will and Grace, and 500 sitcoms. So by the time the issue was decided politically, it was a fait accompli, it was a done deal. Trump recognizes the larger field of battle. Trump is also the most fearless Republican in my lifetime. His bravery far exceeds not only every other Republican candidate, it far exceeds that of Reagan. In the sense that Trump is willing to take on issues and go where no Republican dared to go before. No Republican previously would open a frontal attack on the media. That's Trump. When you think of all the railing about Trump's Twitter, try to think, how crazy is this? Obama, by the way, had 40 million on Twitter. He tweeted out every day, but no one said a whisper about it. Why is it different when Trump tweets? And the answer is really simple. That from the media's point of view, They want all the information about Trump to go through the filter called them. Trump, by making an end run around them, in a sense, thwarts this process. He defeats it. And that's why he's such a threat. Aristotle, in making a list of all the virtues, says that courage is not only the most important virtue, it is the virtue that makes all the other virtues possible. Consider the virtue of honesty. It's a good thing to be honest, but in today's campus environment, you can't be honest if you don't have courage. It takes courage to speak into the wind of, you may say, established opinion, because you'll pay a price, they'll challenge you. So on the campus, you as students are in a much more vulnerable position because the left sets the orthodoxy. They dominate not just the student body, they dominate the faculty for the most part, they dominate the administration. You have a true lack of accountability. These colleges are accountable to no external force. They're not really accountable to state legislatures, even if they're state colleges. They're not accountable to alumni. They're certainly not accountable to trustees. So, in a sense, as a student, you're in the most vulnerable position of all when courage is the most needed, and yet when it costs you. In the 1960s, American academia was sort of reshaped by a group of intellectuals who advanced a new idea that became a kind of clarion call for the 60s New Left. That clarion call was called repressive tolerance. Another word for it, a more popular expression of it, was no free speech for fascists. No free speech for fascists. Now, the inventor of this doctrine was a Berkeley professor named Herbert Marcuse, a refugee from Nazi Germany, who had escaped from Germany, as had many of his colleagues who were part of something in Germany called the Frankfurt Circle. They fled to America. They were seen as oracles on Nazism because they had come from Germany. Many of them were young at the time when Hitler came to power. And these guys came to America, sort of oracles of anti-Nazism. And basically what Marcuse said was, we are the party of tolerance and freedom and equality and diversity, but that's not the way to get our agenda implemented. The way to get our agenda implemented is to be intolerant and to repress freedom and to become, in a sense, the opposite of what we're fighting for. In other words, in order to fight the fascists, we have to be a little fascistic ourselves. Now, I say this because, although this is now 40 years ago, it has a kind of echo in what's going on the campus today. The very champions of tolerance are the most intolerant people of all. Look at American politics more generally. The kind of stuff that the left does, we wouldn't dream of doing. Let's pressure the electors, even after the election's over, we lost, to vote against Obama. No Republican, as far as I know, even came up with that one. Let's go disrupt Obama's inauguration and make it impossible for them to celebrate. Let's break up their party. Let's ruin it. Let's go and break it up. No. Literally, there's discussion of impeachment less than 3 weeks before Trump takes office. Imagine if we had done that to Obama. We wouldn't think about it. I spent 8 months in overnight confinement. Imagine if Trump now opens an investigation of Michael Moore's tax returns and he's convicted, we lock him up for 8 months. We wouldn't dream of doing that. We don't think like that. So we have this sort of reversal. We are accused of fascism and intolerance, and yet we don't do any intolerant stuff. They are the anti-fascists, and they seem to act like fascists. And the point about it is not just that they do it, the point about it is that they think that it is the right way to go. That was Marcuse's point. His point is that ultimately this is a contest of power. And power is ultimately not given, it's extracted. It's extracted. So repressive tolerance is actually, I think, the prevailing norm on the campus today. And the question is, where does this leave you? How do you respond to this kind of phenomenon? How do you react? How do you fight back? As I mentioned, you're kind of in a vulnerable position vis-a-vis the reigning authorities. In your classroom, you got to think, well, do I write in my paper what I think? Or do I modify and accommodate my views to what my professor thinks? Because at the end of the day, I want to get a job, I want to get into graduate school, I want to get a decent grade. And I don't have an answer for you on that one. But I would suggest that on the campus, this repressive tolerance, which is really intolerance, is actually a very serious threat that you should take very seriously. And what that means is that the conventional way of fighting it doesn't really work. I've been following some of the exploits of Milo on the campus, and the sort of electricity on the campus and the craziness in response to him. And here's a guy who's it's not just that Milo's gay, Milo's a comedian. Milo's harmless. Milo's coming on campus to give his point of view, and the reaction is apoplectic. Why? Why? What possibly could he do that is so threatening? He's here on Monday, he's gone on Tuesday. The professors are there every day. What is it about what he's doing that's so threatening? I think thinking about that is a clue to what you should do on the campus. What he does is there are these narrow parameters of debate, a kind of a narrow lane. Everybody has to march in that lane. Milo refuses to accept the guardrails. He refuses to accept the parameters. By the way, in this sense, he resembles Trump. Because one reason Republicans have been, in a sense, hemmed in for so long. For 8 years, I've been hearing people say, those Republican congressmen are such wimps. McConnell is a wimp. Boehner is a wimp. We need to get rid of those guys. Without asking the question, why is McConnell and Boehner such a wimp? Why do they behave in such a timid, terrified, invertebrate manner? And the answer? They are terrified by the media. The media has the power to humiliate, to ridicule, to destroy you. The media, once they're done with you, they do such a good job that our own team will bury the guy. And they know that. And therefore, they march in their lane. And the point I'm trying to make is, on the campus, I think it's time to stop marching in your lane. And what does that mean? That means to think about what are the parameters of discussion and debate that are set for you. How do you start violating them on the margins? And I'm not talking, by the way, I think you know, I'm not talking about letting the racial epithets fly or any of that nonsense. What I'm talking about is expanding the parameters of legitimate debate so that legitimate arguments that are occurring all over the country and are the center of public policy debate that can't be had on the campus, it's your job to make sure that they do occur on the campus. Now, to do that, you have to ask this question, not how do I bring an alternative point of view to the campus? That's way too modest. The real question is, how do I take the existing point of view, the existing apple cart, and overturn it? How do I do that? Because that is actually a truly radical thing to do. The word radical, by the way, here means going to the root of the matter. In that sense, we need to be radicals. When I was an undergraduate, William F. Buckley came to the Dartmouth campus, and he raised a very interesting question, and I'll leave you with this and open the door to this discussion. Buckley said, how can you be a conservative in a liberal society? Now, think about that. As conservatives, we're conserving. But if you are in a liberal environment, a left-wing environment, how do you conserve? What do you conserve? You conserve that? Then you're conserving leftism. So Buckley's point is, what should the conservative do in an environment where there is very little to actually conserve? And his point was, you have to stop being a conservative. You don't stop being philosophically conservative, but you stop being temperamentally and dispositionally and psychologically conservative. You have to become something of a radical, which is to say a guerrilla. A guerrilla. Sort of Che Guevara style. You have to shake up the apple cart. You have to think of imaginative and creative ways to open the parameters of debate and shift the onus onto the other side. I mean, think about the outrageousness of this. The Democratic Party is the party of slavery, of segregation, of Jim Crow, of the Ku Klux Klan, of lynching. This is and of blocking the civil rights movement of the 1960s. This is their history. And these are the same people who are now accusing us of bigotry, us of racism, us of intolerance. These are the same people that have never acknowledged their history, never admitted it, never apologized for it, never paid 1 penny of restitution for anything that they've done. How they have done this is one of the greatest intellectual and political sleights of hand in world history. To be able to take all the wicked things that you did and not only disclaim responsibility for all of them, but stick them onto your opponents who fought you every step of the way. Pulling this off, you got to give it to them. It takes incredible chutzpah, and it takes an incredible control of the history books and of the media to pull this off. We have to unpull it off. We have to, in a sense, lay responsibility where responsibility is due. Not have to apologize for crimes we never committed. This is our task going forward. And it's a new era in America. I think on the balance, it's an incredible, whatever you think of Trump, it's a very hopeful time. It's hopeful considering the alternative. As the maker of Hillary's America, I'm very glad we're not going to be living in Hillary's America. Hey, I hear that donations have dropped off 75% of the Clinton Foundation. New York Times headline yesterday, at the Clinton Foundation, much soul searching. Let's think about this. You've been selling public policy favors for money. You've been running your foundation like a crime syndicate. Now that you no longer have access to power, no one's willing to give you any more money. But from the media's point of view, it's soul searching. So this is how our politics is presented. Our task is immense. Despite Trump, despite our political advantage, let's remember, our advantage is temporary. We have a window. Hollywood, academia, the media, the left owns those things. They have virtually permanent control of them. They own the culture. So our job, we remain the underdog, even in this seemingly victorious moment. We have a lot of work to do. I hope that Trump realizes that. I certainly do. I hope you do. It's our job today to build a better America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I believe we have time for questions, and if you're brief, I'll be brief, and we'll try to get a lot of them in, okay? Let's start with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. D'Souza. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to have you here. My name is Kenny Hsu. I'm co-president of Davidson YAF chapter. My question to you is, what is the most innovative thing that you have seen a student-led conservative group do on campus?
So, an innovative thing that a group of students preceding me at Dartmouth did. was to found the Dartmouth Review. I didn't start it. I joined it at the beginning. But the idea was that in order to fight the drumbeat coming from the left, you need a drumbeat of your own. You need a megaphone. It's kind of like in the atmosphere of national TV, you need Fox News Channel. The value of Fox is not just that Fox is an alternative. It is that Fox, by presenting news in a different way, exposes the lack of objectivity of everybody else. Suddenly you see that the news isn't something that just happened yesterday. The news is filtered through people who decide what the news is and how to present it. So the fact is, Fox has done a lot to show that news itself is largely the product of the messenger. So the idea on the Dartmouth campus was to start a newspaper weekly, so that the students, the rebels, if you will, the guerrillas, have a forum of their own, which is not controlled by the administration. Now, fast forward to now. A lot of young people get their opinions, and not only their political views, but their style, their sense of what's funny, from people like Bill Maher, Jon Stewart, who's the other guy? Oliver, Colbert. Here's my point. Where's our answer to those guys? My point is, now, those guys didn't start on ABC or on HBO. They started the way the Beatles did, 8 days a week in improvs all around the country. Here's my point. If I were young today, I was your age, I would start a web comedy channel. I would encourage young people to do stand-up for 5 minutes or 7 minutes, and I would start that process of improv to build a rival pool of conservative talent. In today's culture where liberalism is the dominant cultural force, conservatism has innumerable opportunities for comedy. Milo is one of the funniest guys, and he's not even a comedian. It just shows you the incredible room that there is to do. There was no comedy under Obama. You notice? You can't think of a single joke they made about Obama because the comedians didn't want to make jokes about Obama. They would make jokes as long as they were harmless jokes. But real humor is always cutting, and humor takes advantage of taboo. So if it were me today, I would think of ways, and the web channel is just one of them, to create forums, not only because comedy is appealing in itself, comedy embodies the most powerful weapon of politics, which is ridicule. The left uses that weapon devastatingly against us. Generally, we don't know how to use it against them. This would be one way to do that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Manfred Wen from Trinity University in San Antonio. You're coming here soon. I was wondering, can you put into words how it felt on election night when you realized that Donald Trump had beaten Hillary Clinton, considering the large role you played in this election and all that you'd been through over the past regime?
Well, you know, Debbie and I were married 10 months ago by Pastor Cruz, Rafael Cruz. This is Ted Cruz's dad. We stayed out of the primary, partly because I was making the movie, and we sort of jumped on the Trump bandwagon once Trump became the nominee. My initial reason for jumping on the bandwagon was essentially, you know, anybody but Hillary. But as I watched Trump, I saw that he was doing things that no Republican would have done. In fact, I firmly believe that no Republican other than Trump could have beaten Hillary. Trump has transcended the normal limits of politics. Republicans have been trying to get the working class vote for 30 years by appealing to social issues. Trump realized that you can get that vote, but you have to appeal to social and economic issues. And he did it, and he got it. And so Republicans won states that we haven't won since '84. I would say my overwhelming feeling on the day of the election was a combination of surprise, in a good sense, and relief. It wasn't even that I was elated. I was just relieved that we were not going to be taking it on the chin for another 4 years from a professional, gangsterized family that is in some ways much more corrupt than even Obama. Obama was fundamentally an ideologue who would resort to lawlessness. Hillary was basically a gangster who would occasionally resort to ideology. So the two of them were in the same camp, but they were temperamentally different. So I'm really glad that we don't have to deal with Hillary. If she's looking for a job, there may well be a crime syndicate that's now looking for a boss with government experience.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emma from UCLA, and on behalf of the Bruin Republicans, thanks again for coming in November. Okay, so the beginning of your talk reminded me of Stephen Skronik and his concept of the cycle of political time. According to him, the opposition party, the party who lost the election, would double down on their ideas. Do you think that this will happen to the left?
I think the left has still not recovered from the election. If you know the Milton's Paradise Lost, the scene begins with the devils rebelling against God and God in a divine thunderbolt hurling all the demons into hell, where for a considerable period of time they just mull around in the darkness, bumping against each other, sort of sullen and amazed. That's the Democratic Party right now. They're in the pandemonium of hell and they don't know what to do, so they're in a crazy mode right now. But they'll settle down. And I think what they're going to try to do, Trump is much more scary to them than Nixon. They hated Nixon. They're going to try to figure out a way to get Trump out. Or if they can't get him out, to make his presidency illegitimate. That's the key word. And in the process of doing that, they're going to try to make all of us illegitimate. This was actually Herbert Marcuse's point. His whole point was, we could have stopped Hitler, we could have stopped the fascists. We didn't move early enough and forcefully enough. And so the left is in that mode. If they're successfully able to hang the fascist label on us and make it stick, it will justify an unbelievable orgy of hatred and violence against us in the name of tolerance. In the name of tolerance. It is our supreme task to stop this. Stop it intellectually, politically, ideologically. The good thing about Trump is his supporters are as fanatical as the left. And before you say, that scares me, you should recognize that we need those guys. We need them. We've never had them. Typically, the left pummels us, and then we protest that we're being pummeled. But we never pummel them back. And if you think about it, there's no better way to stop a bully than to kick him right back in the shins. That's what the Trump people are doing. And as a result, for the first time, the left is like, whoa. Normally, they're kicking us and we're going, whoa. But it's important to realize that we can't let this continue to be done to us, both on the campus and in the country. Okay.
Mr. D'Souza, thank you so much for coming today. My name is Benjamin Schrader from Austin, Texas. And I want to ask you, you've made so many amazing movies. I love all of them. And I want to ask you, what's your favorite thing about making movies?
My favorite thing about making movies is literally standing in the back of the theater. Because when the movie comes out, we'll go to a lot of screenings where in which the movie is just open and we're just in the theater in the back. And so just to watch the audience in the movie, I've been thrilled that in all my 3 movies, at the end of the movie, and this is very rare for a movie, wherever it is, and doesn't matter if it's in red America, the whole audience will stand up and applaud. That's incredible to watch. And even then to see, you know, a Hispanic family where a guy's wife, his 12-year-old and his 10-year-old are walking out of the theater. The reason that's so gratifying to me is all my career I've been a think tank guy, AEI, the Hoover Institution. I say to myself, I would never see that guy in Barnes & Noble buying a copy of my book. So the movie is doing exactly what I wanted. It's reaching abroad to an audience I could never reach in the conventional way. And so in this sense, I myself have tried to be an innovator in politics in creating a megaphone that will duplicate, at least to a small degree, what the left already has. So that's a very gratifying feeling.
Thank you.
Mr. D'Souza, my name is Peter Van Voorst from UC Irvine. Love Hillary's America. If you guys haven't seen it, you should all go see it. It was a great movie. So you mentioned in your talk that you feel that Donald Trump is trying to remake not conservatism, but the Republican Party. And if he does remake the Republican Party to not include conservatism, where do us conservatives go?
Yeah, I didn't actually mean that. What I actually meant to say is that I think that Trump is, by and large, an instinctive conservative across the board. Now, it's important to understand the word instinctive as opposed to ideological. Trump is not an ideological conservative, but he's an instinctive conservatism. His instinctive conservatism comes out of his patriotism, and it comes out of just the street smarts of a guy growing up in Queens. There's a sort of down-to-earth practicality about it. He recognizes, for example, let's imagine that he's facing the question of what do you do to stop terrorist infiltration of America? Trump's mode of reasoning is not something like this. He doesn't think the United States is a social compact among citizens who have made a mutual agreement of self-protection. He doesn't think like that. That's the way the Weekly Standard thinks. And they're right to think that way. The way Trump thinks is the main job of government is to protect people against foreign and domestic thugs. Now, if he was living in Queens and he wanted to protect the neighborhood from some thugs who were coming in from the outside, or if you're a settler in the Wild West in the 1830s taking your wagon out west, and there are outlaws who are known to come in and rob things and take away the horses and rape the women and so on, what do? Number one, you hire some outlaws of your own. Call cops. Number two, you take a fence post and you start building some kind of a fence to make it a little more difficult for the outlaws to get in. This, I think, is Trump's, you may say, primitive. Another way to look at it is earthy, primal, practical way of thinking. Now, people say, well, Trump's not a conservative because he's not for free trade. Well, as I see it, here's what Trump is saying on trade. Free trade is, in principle, the best system of organizing a world economy. I agree completely. But we don't have such a system. We have a system of nation states, and these nation states, some of them, impose mercantilist, trade-blocking policies. So how does a street guy think about that? A street guy goes, listen, I'm not going to be a sucker in a free trade world in which I'm free trade but nobody else is. This would be like me being a pacifist in a world of outlaws. Screw that. So Trump's point is, I'm going to go to the Japanese and I'm going to tell them, listen, you're selling a lot of cars in America, but we're not selling a lot of cars in Japan. Not because we can't, not because people don't want to buy them, because you won't let us. So it's time for you to start taking down those tariffs, because if you don't do that, you might see some tariffs creeping up on your cars over here. And how would you like that? So, now is this anti-free trade? Milton Friedman would say yes. Milton Friedman's point is, if they don't want to be free trade, we should still be free trade. Economically, that's true. But politically, that's stupid. Because that gives no incentive whatsoever, applies no pressure politically on bad guys to take down their barriers. So there is nothing violating the principle of free trade for someone to say to other guys who are not free traders, let's play by the same rules, pal. There's a new sheriff in town. It's a different way to talk, and we haven't talked this way since Bill Buckley and Milton Friedman went skiing in Gstaad and decided that free trade is what the conservative movement should stand for, and it should. But I deny that Trump is violating that free trade compact. I think he's trying to figure out better ways to actually get free trade. Okay?
I'm Nipuna from Oklahoma State University. So the argument I hear mostly by the leftists is that, like, America is oppressive to people of color, the minorities and immigrants, etc. You cannot succeed, like, if you are not of the privileged white, sometimes it is privileged white male. So, but like as an immigrant, like who have lived in a semi-socialist country, and like I have lived in a borderline authoritative state, I know it is false and America is still the land of opportunity. So my question is that how do we defeat that false argument put forward by the left that America is oppressive to the minorities and the people of color? And also, how is that argument is helping the enemies of America? Because I have seen like anti-American news media, like Iranian media and all, airing the Black Lives Matter protesters and speeches from like Reverend Al-Shaft and over again to prove the point that America is an evil place, which is not. So as conservatives, what should we do to prevent that blackening of America by falsely showing this as a racist country? Thank you.
If you look at Black Lives Matter and the confrontation between Black Lives Matter and the cops, the instinctive move of our side is to defend the cop, right? And that sets up a picture that the left wants, which is that they are on the side of the poor, the downtrodden, the wretched of the earth, Frantz Fanon's phrase, against the militarized establishment. So, in some ways, politically, cinematically, we play into their hands by doing that. So I would suggest not that we stop doing that, but that we have a second move that's more complex and more powerful and attacks the left where it's actually vulnerable. And that is, we actually show some sympathy for the guy on the other side. How? By pointing out that the left has actually created a domestic plantation in America in which life is unlivable for the inhabitants there. So imagine if you're a poor black guy raised in inner city Baltimore, horrible schools, right? Broken down neighborhoods, gangs controlling the free movement of people. And so essentially, that's a tough way to grow up. It's almost like it gives you PTSD to grow up there. Now, as a society, we need law and order, so we send in some cops who are often the same age as the guys on the street and say, go straighten that place out. It's an impossible task for the cops because they haven't created any of the psychological, the social, and the moral problems of the inner city, widespread illegitimacy, broken families, gangs, drugs. Cops didn't do any of that, nor can they fix it. So my point is, that's what we should fix. And if we do that, we will be going to the root cause of these problems. We will be fighting on the side, not just of the cops, but even of the kid who is up against the cops. And we will make the Black Lives Matter people irrelevant. So I would suggest as conservatives that we, not only because that's the right thing to do, but also because we don't want to fall into the leftist tableau of people of color fighting the cops. We will defeat that image, and we will also prove that we actually can help these neighborhoods in a practical way.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. D'Souza, my name is Grant Wolf. I'm the chairman of YAF at SMU, and first of all, I'd like to thank you for coming to our campus in November, right after the election. It was certainly an entertaining lecture. I wanted to ask you some of the response to your ideas and your movies and things of that nature on our campus, and that I've heard from colleagues, is they dispute the facts that you present as either conspiracies or hyperbole, that it's not really true that the Democratic Party has this history, or of course, the myth of the big switch. Would you be able to explain kind of the, the legitimacy of the facts that you present for the case against the Democratic Party?
The reason that the left is in such a position of strength on this is that they have academia, the media, and Hollywood, the three biggest megaphones of our culture. So much of what we consider conventional wisdom is generated in academia, amplified by the media, and sort of immortalized by Hollywood. And then it becomes a fact. So, for example, it is a fact that the slavery debate was between the North and the South. Never mind that the Northern Democrats defended slavery. Never mind the fact that most Southerners, including Southerners who fought in the Civil War, didn't own slaves. All of that is sort of put aside to set up this dichotomy. Now, I agree that the secession debate was North-South, but the slavery debate never was. And so what I try to do to challenge this orthodoxy, and you can see the difficulty of doing it, I'm up against these 3 megaphones, is I just try to put out incendiary facts that cannot be challenged in one iota. So if you watch the movie, I say very calmly, in 1860, the year of the Civil War, in which, by the way, there were, I don't say this in the movie, but there were 4 million slaves in America in 1860. I say, no Republican owned a slave. All those slaves, every one of them, was owned by a Democrat. Now, this is like fighting words, right? Number one, I've never heard anyone say that in my life. Number two, it's a factual claim. It's very easily refutable in a scientific sense. All you have to do is give me a list of 5 Republicans who own slaves, and I'd have to take it back. No Democrat, no liberal, no progressive has been able to give a single example. The only example in the entire debate following my movie is somebody said that Ulysses H. Grant inherited on his wife's side a slave. And I pointed out that that was true, but that occurred at the time when Ulysses H. Grant was a Democrat. So the single effort on the basis of one guy to refute my argument falls. So this is what I mean. Facts are very incendiary because everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And so I try in my movies to make them emotionally powerful, but to have a certain density of facts like this that are out there, irrefutable, and the left can shout and scream, but there it is. There it is. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Joey Vetter from Austin College in Sherman, Texas. Although President Trump obviously won the election, he lost the popular vote by right around 3 million votes. And in the past 7 elections, only in one of those elections has a Republican presidential candidate won the popular vote. Now, of course, the popular vote is irrelevant, at least in regards to who wins the presidency. But would you say that this recent lack of popular support, at least in regards to the presidential election, is concerning for the Republican Party? And what solutions, if any, would you think of for that?
The left is trying to invoke a certain moral sense in which the popular vote is the real vote. Now, I confess I don't even get that. It's kind of like this. Consider the game of tennis. 5 sets. In order to win, you need to win 3 sets. Right? Let's say the tennis score goes something like this. 6-4, 6-4, 0-6, 1-6, 6-4. If you actually do the math, you'll see that the loser won more points because the 2 sets that he lost, he won by bigger margins. But he lost 3 sets to 2. That's the rules of the game. Now, what sense does it make for someone to say, I lost the match, but I won more overall points? And what sense would it make for the winner to go, man, I better go back to my coach to figure out, no, this is the rules of the game. Listen, these rules of the game are permanent. Why? Because the left can never change the Electoral College without our consent, which we are never going to give. So as a result, the 2/3 majority, the 2/3 of the states, they'll never get it. So I love to have them talk about the popular vote. They can talk about that all day. What I think we should focus on is actually figuring out how to shore up the working class vote, not just white, but black and Hispanic as well, because that's what's going to make the Republican Party the majority party. If you ask me what to think about, I would be thinking about things like this. How do we try to figure out a way to get another couple of 100,000 people to move to Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Florida to lock up those states for our side for the next 25 years? If we could convince 100,000 Republicans to move into those states, that's going to help our votes. Let the left get another million in California. More power to them. So in politics, it's kind of a mistake to take your eye off the ball. American politics is a very carefully structured game. You can't say, we lost the election, but had it been according to the parliamentary system in Norway, we would have won. We don't have a parliamentary system. We're not going to get one. I mean, Trump sort of had, I think, a half-joking response to all this when he basically said, if somebody had told me it was all about the popular vote, I had a campaign in California and won the popular vote. So his point is he didn't even campaign, and it's true. I live in California. Neither of the candidates ever showed up. So that the election isn't even contested in some of those states. So we're talking about a different system altogether. I don't think we need to worry about it in the short term.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alvin. I'm a sophomore at Cornell. And as YAF students, we must stand against any organizations which serve as obstacles to freedom. And I, along with my peers at Cornell, agree that organizations such as SJP serve as obstacles to peace, especially in a region of the world which lacks it. So how do you recommend countering such organizations? Because a lot of times conservative methods such as logic don't work against them.
What's SJP?
Students for Justice in Palestine.
Oh, yeah, right. As conservatives, we sometimes tend to set up this dichotomy between reason and emotion. And we say, isn't it a pity that we have all the logic on our side and they only have the emotion on their side? This is a wrong way to think, because human minds are made up by a combination of facts and feelings. Persuasion is a complex process that involves not only reasoning in the classical sense, but one's feeling of what is right and wrong, just and unjust. Our problem is not that the left has too much emotion or that facts aren't deciding the matter. Our problem is that the left has monopolized the issue of justice. Very often when they say justice, all we can say back is freedom. But you have to remember that freedom never cancels out justice. Freedom and justice are two separate things. And in fact, if you believe Aristotle, justice is the primary virtue of every society. The deprivation of justice always causes outrage. The deprivation of freedom only causes puzzlement. Because we deprive people of freedom all the time in our society, and if there's a good reason for it, it's okay. But there's no such thing as okay injustice. So the left has grabbed onto the biggest, most important moral issue and monopolized it, and we have let them. So part of what I try to do in my movies, if you notice, I don't even know if I mentioned the word freedom in Hillary's America. I mentioned the word justice a lot because I'm attacking them on ground where they think they are secure. That's the kind of guerrilla disruption I had in mind earlier when I said disrupt the apple cart. What I meant is take things where they think they're strong. Comedy, they think they own it. Hollywood, they think they own it. So part of what I'm doing now is I'm actually pivoting from documentary films to feature films. Why? Partly because I realize that the big guy in Hollywood is not Michael Moore. I mean, he's the biggest guy in Hollywood, maybe. But he's not as big as Steven Spielberg. And that ultimately, the ideological message of Hollywood comes not through documentaries. It comes through romantic comedies. It comes through thrillers. It comes through horror films, animated family films. So if we want to have a conservative beachhead, we have to make those kinds of movies. So our task is large, but we're up to it. And the good thing is you become very effective in politics if you come to see it as fun. Every time I go on Twitter, I literally tweet out, and within seconds, 10 paid leftists are on my Twitter blasting me. Felon, this kind of thing. And so a normal human disposition is going to go, oh man, why am I on Twitter? You feel kind of beaten down. You feel kind of disheartened. By the way, that's a small example of the inequity, right? I don't believe there's anybody, and we don't even think like this. Let's pay conservatives so that every time Nancy Pelosi goes on Twitter, 40 conservatives go on and start blasting her looks, blasting her family, blasting her kids, making fun of what she said, ridiculing her, intimidating her to drive her out of public life. Which of us even thinks like this? I mean, I do, but in general, we don't think like this. So my point is there's an inequity of pressure on their side. It takes a particular disposition not to worry about it. And in fact, after a while, it takes a little while to have fun with it, to basically recognize that all this stuff that they're saying, even their outrage, is theatrical. It's feigned. It's not real. If somebody comes up to you and says, you're a racist, I assure you that deep in their heart, they know they're lying. What's my proof? Here's my proof. If they really thought you were a racist, they would never accuse you of it. No one ever accuses me of being an Indian. Why? Because if they did, I would smile and take it as a compliment. I'd be super excited. Thank you. Right? You only make an accusation against somebody where you know that they're going to become uncomfortable. They're going to become defensive. Why? Because their own moral code rejects racism. So the very charge of racism is based on the assumption that the person you're accusing is not a racist. That's how you can get them up against the wall in the first place. So once you know that, you recognize this is a game. And you have to learn how to play it well. And if you do, you have a very successful future as somebody who's a true radical in the sense of going to the root of the matter and expanding the parameters of the acceptable in a country that very much needs that right now. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.